In Greek, you're studying Greek? 2 words, soulege. Well, imagine soulege in Mark and then go to John and go, wow, that's quite a contrast. But I'll say this, if Matthew, Luke, and John had never been written, there would be many more Jews alive today. Because it's bad, it's a nightmare, but it's not as bad as John.
Okay, moving on to the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, is that me?
Oh, hey there. Yeah, go ahead. Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from New York. I am currently learning ancient Greek, so we just finished all of John in ancient Greek. And I have a lot of Christian classmates over here, and I have a hard time just saying, like, oh, the Jews didn't actually, like, give Jesus over to crucify him. Like, that story is not actually how it went down. I'm curious if there's any, like, Jewish sources that talk about this, or there's any way that we can actually know what went on from, like, a Jewish point of view at the end of John with the whole crucifixion.
No, I want to keep you on. This is very interesting. You sound like a from woman, a religious woman. I don't know. We just somehow, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. Oh, you are? Okay. So it's very interesting. So, no, there's nothing in Talmudic sources that the Jews gave over Jesus to Rome. That would never happen. Rome is the arch enemy. That would never happen. If you want to know where Christians get that from, all you need to do, so I'm saying this to a religious woman, is read John chapter 19. That's all you have to do, is read John 19 or read Matthew 27, because those are the most amped up. Because the story of a crucifixion is not found in the letters of Paul. It's found in the Gospels. You have references to the crucifixion, but the storyline is in the Gospels. And if you read Matthew 27 or John 19, bingo. There's no other way. But there's no other story like it. And what you're seeing essentially is a very, unfortunately, very well-written tale about how the Jews are the ones who are responsible for this and that the Romans were not, because this is a Roman form of execution. So why is Pontius Pilate off the hook for this? And why are the Jews completely, uniquely culpable for this? And that's what Matthew and John, very similar, but there are some striking differences, are very carefully presenting to the viewer. But there's nothing like that in Chazal at all. Is that
correct? So when
you?
the Christians say that I mean, I've read the John in ancient Greek, and when the Christians say that the Jews gave him, and Pilate is not responsible because Pilate's kind of just doing, the will of God because the Jews gave him over. There is no, like, other than saying, like, okay, John is not a credible source. Like, there is no other way to know whether or not. Meaning, it's just like the Christians and their own story. I'm just curious about, like, what is there, like.
Well, this is what will help you a lot. And that is, you could see the story developing considerably. And what I would encourage you to do is to, I can't believe I'm encouraging a religious woman to do this, but if you want to see how the story gains more and more color, compare the Passion narrative found in the book of Mark, the earliest surviving gospel, to John, the last gospel. So just look at Mark and look at John. Okay, like just the two side by side, like you Mark 14, 15. So what are you going to see there? So in Mark, you notice that Jesus is not saying these things to Pontius Pilate. Like look at John 19:11. It's what you said, that Jesus is having a very lucid conversation and explaining to Pontius Pilate that in fact you have no authority. It's literally what it says. You have no authority. And therefore, those who gave me over to you, their sin is greater. Okay? All right. That's a very lucid conversation, and Jesus is really in control there. He's not only in control like Luke in control, he's much more so, because he's taking charge of the conversation between himself and Pontius Pilate. Compare that to Mark. Mark, what does Jesus say? In Greek, you're studying Greek? 2 words, soulege. You said it. Well, imagine soulege in Mark and then go to John and go, wow, that's quite a contrast. What's happening there? So the culpability of the Jew is in Mark. It's not like John invented this. But John is way, way amped up. And Mark, it's nasty. But I'll say this, if Matthew, Luke, and John had never been written, there would be many more Jews alive today. Because it's bad. It's a nightmare, but it's not as bad as John. And it's not as bad as Matthew 27. So it's just amped up. It's dialed up. I'll share one thing with you I was thinking about this weekend as well. I've been doing this for a long time. More than 40 years. And the interesting is, when I started doing this, really in the late 70s, I encountered many of the Christians that you know of today. I knew them. And their story, their own testimonials just grew exponentially, where the story just gets amped up and the storytelling gets crazier and crazier as time goes on. It's like the same guy. And the story he told in the 1980s is nowhere near as interesting as the one he tells today at churches. Why? Because they amp up the story. It develops. That's what's happening in the New Testament. You had a story, and then the story gets amped up and amped up. And you could see that. You could trace it. Matthew being first in the Christian Bible is an impediment because it's not the first gospel in chronologically. So there's your answer. How interesting. Su lege, there's Jesus' dialogue. Compare that to that whole thing in John. John is very well known for huge dialogue, but what a different... in Mark, you have a cry of dereliction. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why did you forsake me? Holy smokes, there's nothing like that in John. Jesus knows exactly why he's there. He knows why Pontius Pilate's there. He understands why everybody's there. It's different in this way. Jesus is completely in control in Luke and John, but in a different way. But he's in control in both, and he has no clue what's happening around him in the book of Mark, which doesn't really make sense, but it differs sharply. Thank you for your question.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא